Welcome to Closing Conversations, a show for founders, leaders, and sellers who win together. I'm Max Notis. For our very first episode, we're diving into what makes top sales talent say yes or nope to a new role. If you're hiring sellers or trying to land great ones, this conversation's packed with insight. I'm joined by Chris Brady and the go-to-market team at Sage. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Closing Conversations, a show for founders, leaders, and sellers who win together. I'm your host, Max Notis, and I am fired to kick off this episode with a conversation that feels super relevant right now. We're talking about hiring salespeople, specifically what makes top sellers say yes to a role or nope, not for me. And I couldn't think of a better crew to dig into that with than Chris Brady and the go-to-market team at Sage. And these are folks who have seen every kind of pitch. They've seen every red flag and every reason that a great salesperson either joins the team or walks away. So, Chris, I'll pass it to you to kick things off, and we'll go around the horn.
All right, awesome. Well, excited to be here. Thanks, Max, for the intro. And I'm excited to also bring some super talented folks with me. So my name is Chris Brady, and I've been in the recruiting business for a long time. Like, put it this way, when I started, I didn't have a computer. If that gives you any idea. But I've been kind of growing, scaling, leading recruiting teams for a long time. And most of my focus has been on driving revenue through those teams. So, definitely we're very aligned on the business side. I'm going to hand it over to Betty.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Max. And thank you, Chris, for having me on this as well, being part of Team Sage. So I focus on go-to-market in North America. I bring with me a cybersecurity background in hiring global teams, so international teams as well. Everything from the entry level up to VP level. So it's been wonderful to be at Sage and be able to focus on strategic hiring for our XDR organization. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Emily.
Awesome. Yeah. Hello. My name is Emily Botero. I have not been in recruiting quite as long as Chris has. There has been computers ever since I've been in the world, but I've been here for 6 years in recruiting. 3 of those years have been in tech and mainly focusing on the go-to-market side of the business. So yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, so let's start here. Something that we hear all the time is, we need someone from this company. That's the kind of rep who's going to crush it here. Why is that line of thinking so common, and what's the real problem behind it?
I think that is common because people assume that larger companies are going to have the same type of talent pool, that they're going to have the same sort of enablement training, therefore they're all going to have the same success. And you find that a lot of times in those environments they will, but then take them out of that element and put them into a new environment, and they may not experience that same level of success. So it's false to say that just because Emily crushed it at Sage, if she were to go to a Cisco or a Google, she might not have the same success because the setup is different, the requirements are different, the team environment is different. So that's just been my experience with that, but I'm not sure what Emily and Chris have to say.
I would say the problem with that is you're missing out on so much talent. There's so much good talent out there that isn't working at these big companies just because timing isn't right, or maybe location, or for whatever reason, they just haven't worked at those larger companies, but they still have so much potential, so much experience to bring to the table outside of what those bigger company sort of candidates can bring to the table. So we're missing out on so much talent if that's the case.
And I think a lot of times, if you're, kind of breaking this down from a psychological standpoint, why would you target specific companies? Most of the time, the hiring managers or leaders have come from those companies. So it's kind of like, well, I'm great, so everyone else that we hire from those companies must be great too if we hire them. And the challenge is that you're literally taking whatever their DEI, culture, talent focus is, and you're just moving that to your company. And so it's like, do your homework, figure things out, and define that profile. What is that? What are the skills that's needed, Max and team? And I think you're bringing people that will totally change what you thought good looked like because they don't have that background, but they have something else that you don't have. But sometimes organizations just don't know that.
Can I tell you, I want to piggyback off that, Chris. And as we're all going around the horn saying this, what comes to my mind is it's lazy thinking. It's thinking, again, like you just said, they trained them really well. Let's bring that and plug it in. And I'm a big New York Jets fan, which is something I don't want to really talk too much about on this show. But it's like the New York Jets saying, oh, this person was like a great quarterback on another team. Let's bring him here and it'll turn it around. And it doesn't. It was a different team. It was a different atmosphere. And it doesn't mean because he was successful one place that'll be successful on your team or a basketball team. You know, I remember when the Golden State Warriors were really good and they were, you know, championship after championship. And then someone's, oh, let's get one of those guys over here. And it's like, well, some of those people are real natural leaders who will go do know what it takes to win and will make it happen. But a lot of those people were also successful just because they were on that team. And even thinking about it, like when you look at sports, the amount of captains of a team, like I'm a big hockey fan, Mark Messier, championship. He brought the Edmonton Oilers to a championship and then brought the New York Rangers to a championship. He's the only captain in the history of hockey that's done that with two teams. You know, and in sports in general, like look at football. I think Peyton Manning might be the only quarterback that's done it with two teams. Tom Brady, sorry. But it's really rare when you have a Super Bowl winning or a championship winning captain that they actually are able to go over and reproduce it somewhere else. It's usually done the right way from the roots from the ground up, where they bring people in, inspire them, create leaders, and establish this winning team culture.
Yeah. And you want people that think differently, right? We don't want everyone that's using the same processes, the same workflow. You want different people that can bring different insights to the company as well, versus just having that same, thought process for whatever they're doing. If the entire team is doing the same thing, what changes are you making? There's not going to be many changes. So definitely would say you want different thinking coming in as well.
And if you think about it, when you focus on specific companies, you're bringing in a lot of times people that are a little more senior, depending on the organization, and they might be successful in that environment, but they might have an ego, or there might be some other things that are blocking them where they're not going to come in and align to a new environment. So I think that's the other piece of things. We always want to focus on hiring people. That adaptability piece is so crucial because, just like you had a couple different sports analogies, there's a lot of stories of people that have been successful in one organization and tried to move over to another one. It's like an epic fail.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And why is that? And you see that with coaches and organizations too, as well. So I think that's the interesting thing on our side of things is, we're trying to influence and we're trying to focus on hiring the best people, but there's a lot of things in the behind the scenes. Sales enablement piece, Max, is such a core piece of this too, because you can hire the right people, but if you don't have the right way to onboard them, we know that organizations that don't have a structured onboarding program, I think it's like 40% less productivity in the first year because of that. And I know that's a big piece of kind of what you do as well.
And I think that there's this false misconception that when they're bringing a sales talent in, for example, that absolutely crushed it at one company. I've had this happen where, they brought someone over thinking they were going to have the same success, and they weren't able to have the same success. Even though they still had those business relationships, the relationships weren't what they found out the hard way. They weren't with that sales rep. They were with the company that the sales rep represented. So when you pull that person out of that company, the customer didn't want to talk to them. They wanted to talk to the next rep from that company. So things like that can happen as well, which doesn't truly benefit you if you're just pulling from one company thinking that's where my success is coming from.
Really good point. Anything else on this topic before we move on? No?
On to the next.
On to the next. All right. So topic number 2, what the best salespeople actually want. So let's flip it. When you think about the best salespeople that you've worked with or that you've placed, what actually did seal the deal for them? What is it that top sellers really want in a role today?
Yeah, I think that depends on what level they are too, right? Like if you're a more senior sales rep versus more junior, you're going to want completely different things. And Betty, maybe you can talk to that too more so the junior ones. But as far as the senior reps, how likely are they to hit their OTE? That's huge. I think it's one of the number one things that I get asked is, okay, great, that's the OTE. How many people are actually hitting that? Yeah, how many people are actually hitting that? Because there's so many companies that throw out this huge OTE, but then reality is, 20% of reps are actually hitting OTE, or any, if for that matter. So that's probably the number one rep for my more senior reps is what's the reality of me actually hitting my number and hitting that OTE or overachieving. Those are my number one questions I get asked with the more senior reps, I would say.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of the candidates I'm speaking with are wanting to see what that growth path is. So they want to know, like, if I put in my 2 years here as an XDR, am I going to have a path to promote me into an AE role? Like, will I become a closer? What does that look like? What are you doing to help coach me along the way to ensure that I'm available and ready to be promoted? So that promotion piece is huge. But something else since COVID that I've seen is a lot of my candidates are looking for, like, what do you do to give back? Like, they're looking for that philanthropic piece and culture. And it's not like the diversity in culture, but it's just, what is your company like? Are you investing in your employees? Like, do you believe in their mental wellness, right? So definitely, how am I going to make money? Otherwise, I wouldn't be in sales. What's that path look like for me to be able to grow my career with you and be promoted into those opportunities? But then 3, also, like, what are you doing as a company to help, where our people live and be able to give back to the community where we serve?
And I think, we're all work at Sage. So I think for us, that's the easiest selling point, right? Because this is one of the first organizations I worked at that they'll select specific leaders, but they'll also say, okay, I want you to take some time away from work and focus on your community. How do you do that? And we've got Sage Grow. We've got a new thing right now for Sage entrepreneurs that I just actually did a webinar for them, how to hire when you're a startup. What do you do? And I think for us, like last year, I was involved in the Sage Grow, which was awesome. They took, I think it was 5 non-for-profits, and they had several VPs, directors, executive leaders imparting their time. We even had a CFO spending time helping that one of these organizations set themselves up for success. And so it's easy to write a check, but it's harder to take time away because, what are those 2 things that you have? You have money and you have time. But you're right, Betty. Most people at some point get to a point in their life where they want to give back. They're like, hey, why did I learn all of these things to just hold it to myself? So it's a really good point.
Another thing is, like, when sales reps or anybody in go-to-market, when they're interviewing, one thing I would always say is take note of the recruiter in the sense of, are they happy to be at that company? Do they seem passionate about the company? Or are they just there because they're getting paid to do it? Because I think that makes such a difference. I know I always tell reps, especially when I'm talking to them, is, to turn it in a sales perspective, you are selling a product. It's easier to sell a great product versus a bad product. Doesn't matter how great of a sales rep you are. If you have a good product, it's going to be easier to sell. So how I look at it is when I'm selling Sage per se, it's easy for me to do that as a recruiter because it's a great company to be at. There's a million reasons why I want to be here. And I feel like when I'm talking to candidates, that shows. And I think there's some, if a recruiter is talking to you and they're just saying word by word, they're reading the lines, saying what they need to say, then there's probably a problem at that company, but they're just doing their job to get a paycheck. So that's another thing I would try to be cautious of is maybe do a little more research in that too.
Yeah, you're right, Emily. And that authenticity, they can sniff it out, right? If anyone can sniff, it's salespeople. And so if you're not being authentic with them because, you don't buy in and you're not agreeable with everything that this company represents, it's hard to recruit them over. But we have a great story and we live our values. And so it's a much easier pitch for us.
Max, have you ever interviewed with someone and just done kind of the eyeball check?
Well, I'm going to tell a story. Actually, I was just thinking this from my brother. My brother, he's been somewhere for a little while now, but when he was interviewing, he was talking to a few companies and he gets an offer from one company and he says, if you don't mind, I want to see what I've been talking to a few people. I'd like to see what the offers look like. And they say, sure. And, long story short, it was Saturday at 4 a.m. and they sent him an email saying, are you going to join or not? And I'm thinking, dude, they're messaging you at 4 a.m. on a Saturday and you don't even work there yet. Think of what that's going to be once you get there. I can't even imagine. You already know what you're signing up for. And the eyeball test, just like, Betty said, you can read between the lines, especially in sales. 80% of communication is nonverbal. So that 20% is really important. And we get really keen on picking those things up. So when you're talking to the recruiter, sometimes you're sussing out are you desperate for me?
Correct.
You know, are you right now how I'm afraid I'm going to be if I join your team in 4 months and I better get this next deal or I don't even know what's going to happen to me? You're losing sleep. So I think those are important things. And I think a lot of it also boils down to, this is something also that I guess came up between a few of these is, you know, salespeople, I think today more than potentially ever, they feel very disposable. Like they're being brought on. Can you make it? Can you make a dent in 4 months? Given the whether they be ample resources or no resources, whether it be fair or unfair, you're gone. And it's very, very cutthroat. Like it's like you are the number that's over your head and that's it. Which, hey, in all fairness, like that is your job. But there's a little bit of callousness when it comes to that. And so going back to the, like, you know, salespeople want to know what's their career path ahead. I think I said this on another conversation, but like, you can't ask me where I see myself in 5 years if you can't answer the same for me. Right. If I say, if I do my job, where do you see me in 5 years? And, oh, well, there are a lot of, that's where the sniff test comes in. You know, is there really a plan of, well, you can go in one of two routes and this is what people tend to do. And if you prefer to do this, you'll probably like this. Well, good question, Max. Where do you want to be? You know, like, where you're enthused because I answered that question or asked that question, or are you on your heels and you're just BSing me? I don't know. It's like, as salespeople, we know what it's like to fib an objection, and the customer picks up on that. And the same thing, now I'm the customer. I'm saying, where do you see me? And, well, for example, we're a small company, so, you know, there are lots of growth patterns and options. And it's like,
yeah.
You have no idea. You don't care about me. You care about the immediacy of me. And then if you seem to need me enough, then you'll want me. And that's like, that being a tool. Like that's the definition of being a tool.
And that's not what they're looking for. You know, I think with that authenticity piece, it's always explaining to them that there's a 2-step process to, or there's 2 parts to it. There's your readiness, and then there's opportunity within the company. And I feel that that's very fair to be able to share with them. Once you're ready, and if we have the right opportunity, and I do say you're able to compete, because it doesn't mean, I'm not saying you're going to guarantee get that, but the opportunity to be able to compete against other of your peers or even external people, that will be made available to you. So I do believe that even if you don't have all of the answers, but to be able to paint enough of a picture to be transparent enough with them to say, here are the things I can talk about. I can tell you how we are going to enable and how we are going to groom you and how we're going to train you. I can talk about the types of opportunities that are available to you. And unfortunately, if you're ready, we don't have that yet. You know, we may have to lose talent that we've invested in, but we also want what's best for you. And I think that's something that we have to make sure we articulate to the people that we really want to bring on board.
Totally. And that's just like you're saying, it's authenticity. And like, if you don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years, there's a difference between fibbing and being honest and saying, listen, we don't have a path. We're growing, and therefore, like, there are options and all sorts of things. Or even as you were saying, and here's how we're going to train you. I think a great option would be for a company to say, by the way, do you think that would be sufficient for you? Do you think there's anything else that we could be doing that you'd need? Or do you think some of it might be redundant for you? And then we're working together on making sure this works for me. It's not like commission breath. It's not like you're just saying anything to get me aboard. And then once again, I'm disposable once I sign on the dotted line.
And I think if the organization that is doing the recruiting, if they don't have a specific example that they can talk to, well, let me tell you about Tanya. She started last year, 6 months ago, and we actually skipped 2 roles to set her up for success because she was killing it over here. If they can't talk about real things and then they just go back to the corporate speak and are like, well, we're going to level you up. And as long as you are thinking outside the box, like if they hit those 10 annoying corporate speak words, then you probably need to go the other way as fast as you can. But it should be like for recruiters and even hiring managers, it should be on their tongue. They should be thinking about, how do I move my organization faster? And it's bringing in the right talent and helping them grow. And they should have examples, because if they don't have examples, then they're most likely not doing it.
Excellent point.
That was a really good one.
Yeah, loved it. Great job, Chris.
Me?
That's going to get edited out. Great job, Chris.
Okay.
don't know about that.
But that was good. That was good. I like
And
that.
it's true. Everything you said, it's very
It
true.
definitely is.
When you were saying that, I was like thinking of, oh yeah, this is a story I've said, or I remember the hiring manager using this story before.
Yeah. Here's an example that I can share to be able to demonstrate and not just like BS you and say, you could do this or you could do that.
I'm going to pivot a little bit even from what we've been talking about. And this happens a lot where you'll interview somebody, you'll interview a salesperson for an individual contributor role. And you say, why do you want this job? And they say, well, I want to be in management soon. And it's like, wait a minute, I need to make sure that you know that you're really applying for this role. And sure, there might be a possibility to be in management, but you're going to have to do this role really well for at least 2 years. And I think that that's a tricky line that people get caught on. Like when the company really wants the seller, they'll say, sure, and then just bring them in for that immediate revenue. Or the seller might say, oh, they said management. And it's like you're looking at, both sides could be looking at this with rosy lenses.
Yeah, I would say that, in those situations, as we are continuing to collect data from the candidate as to what it is that motivates them, what drives them, what they're looking for next, right? And they say that manager word. It isn't something that I disregard, but I do put in my notes because I want my hiring manager to then assess, hey, this person's great, but they are looking at a managerial growth path. Maybe during your conversation with them, kind of assess that a bit more. Like what's the timeline that they're considering and they're thinking that they want to, so that we can set that expectation correctly, right? And then you, hiring manager, you need to determine and decide as you're speaking to this individual, can you deal with them for a year and then get them out because that's what their timeline looks like? Or are you going to want them in seat longer than that? Because then you have to be fair to the candidate as well in terms of this is what their needs are. This is what they're asking for. And, even if it isn't going to fit, we just need to be honest with them because I feel transparency is also something that is going to make or break, whether a person moves forward with you.
Yeah. I love the M word personally. It just shows that, they want more. They have goals. They're striving for more than just settling, or they're thinking about that 5-10 year plan. But I think, like you said, that transparency piece, and just so they know, okay, this is not a manager role. This is going to be in this role for a few years. The manager has expectations for you to perform in this role for a few years before management is even in the picture. So making sure that they understand that. But I definitely wouldn't disregard anyone for saying that. But just as long as they understand that that's not this position. It's going to take some time to get to that position. But personally, I love it. I love that they have goals and they're striving for more.
Well, and another way to make the most out of that person is when they come aboard, you meet with your manager and they say, so I understand that you want to be in leadership. Yes, I do. All right. So now here's the path to that. It's going to take 2 years and you need to be hitting above your quota by this amount. Now, our top performers, they're doing these activities per day. They're reaching out to these types of people. Like, make it really clear. This is your path. And if you do that, here is the promised land.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, if I were looking for leadership and I have it roles and I go aboard and I'm in there 6 weeks and I'm thinking, they don't know that's what I want. Like, that's not happening. That takes the wind out of your sails. If you walk in and the team says, this is what we want and this is how we're going to get you there, that person's going to work harder than anybody because you're bought in for more than your paycheck. You're bought in there for your career. And now if they're really meeting you halfway, you're going to appreciate and respect the whole team, the whole process, everything about it much more.
And that's an area where, like, in some of those screening questions, in addition to asking them what's important to them, I also want to ask them, like, what's important to you in your next leader? Like, what are you looking for in your next leader? And those notes are seen by the leaders because I want them to also see, if you really want this talent, these are the things that's going to be important to them from you. These are what the attributes that they want from you. So as you are going into your conversation with them, you make sure you check off those boxes because here's someone that we want on our team.
Yeah. And it's no secret nowadays that so many people are leaving, not the company, but they're leaving leadership.
It's always been that HR saying, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers.
Correct.
So I want to pivot to something because part of the hiring process that's often overlooked is the sales manager in the hiring process. So how much does that manager, how they show up for the interview, how they talk about the team, how much does that actually make in terms of a difference of getting a great candidate to say yes or no?
Makes all the difference.
It makes all the difference. Absolutely. Yeah. Like when you're saying that, I'm shaking my head. I'm like, yes, now you're saying our words because, Em says this a lot. We need them to sell just as much as we're selling. And if they are going in flat, why would you expect somebody to want to work for you? Why would you want top talent to come here? Right? You want to be a good representation of the organization, but also of a future leader that this individual can see themselves developing under, growing, wanting to like be successful for them, right? And if that manager isn't selling that opportunity properly, not just to the candidate, but to the people on their panel, so that everybody's marching to the beat of this, like the same drum, right? Then that just gets to that candidate experience to where candidates are like, I'm checked out. Manager said this person said this person said that. There's obviously some disconnects going on. So they're very, very critical in helping us with the candidate experience and capturing the right candidate.
Yeah, because you can literally have the best recruiter in the world, but if that manager can't articulate what that value is, so them joining the company, it's very, very difficult. Like when I was on my own doing external search, most clients that I had that were A clients were because of that the person that I was working with, their engagement, they were excited, they were taking ownership of it. You know, it wasn't just like, serve me, send me all the people, let me look at them, I will decide and pick a button, and once I press that button, you can send them my way. They're messaging me at 8:00 at night saying, hey, check out this profile, Chris. I'm super excited about this person's background. And guess what? When they get on the call with them, it
comes through.
It's so easy. And a lot of organizations do this on the tech side too. But if you find a great leader and a great hiring manager, I'm just like, let them loose. Set them up for success, help them, from a structured standpoint as far as their team. Because there's other pieces to that too. I've seen searches where you had an amazing hiring manager, but then you have another peer that has to come in and interview, and they're like a total dud. And then you're like, hey, have you guys discussed why this person's part of the process? What value are they adding? But also, we're losing candidates because you guys are describing two different things for this job. Because that's another thing that is like, could be a book on the dysfunctional process of hiring when you're not aligned, right?
I have a few hiring managers that I think of them as closers. Like, I need them to come on because I know they're going to give it a great experience. Candidates get super excited talking to them. After I follow up with the candidate after their interview, they're like, oh my gosh, I could see myself on that person's team. They were incredible. Seeing their growth and how their path at Sage, like, oh, I want to do that. I can definitely see myself. So I think of these managers as closers. Like, I need them in the interview process, but they're not all like that by any means. But especially in today's market, you kind of have to be. Candidates have so many options that you have to give them such a good experience, because that alone can be so, like, just the maker of if they're going to go with your company or other companies that are giving them offers. It doesn't matter. The compensation could be higher in one place, but they can't see themselves there. They can't see themselves under that leadership. So they're going to choose the other company just because of that. So it's so crucial to have a good process and people talking and interviewing with candidates and really selling the role, but also being honest about it too. Like you said, not fluffing it, not giving them, just telling them what they want to hear, but being honest with them, because they do see that. Candidates know who's lying and fluffing it up to them. So it's super important, I think.
I feel like enthusiasm sells in this capacity. Like, it sells tremendous. Like, I've had interviews where I've gotten off the phone, or we're wrapping the call, and the manager says, hey, by the way, I want you to take my cell, because if you have any questions, I want to make sure that you can ask me. Like, it's Friday. Don't worry about it. If it's on the weekend, just like, I'm happy to just, back and forth. And I'm thinking, this person would have my back. Whereas there are other people I've talked to, and I feel like I'm holding them up from getting out for the weekend. Like, they just don't want to be there. And I'm thinking, if I were drowning, this person would let me drown. And there's not, I don't want to sign my life, my income, my family's leaning on me to somewhere where they don't even care. Like, they don't care if I come aboard or not. So if you're listen, they're better sales managers than others, but if you're enthusiastic, if you demonstrate I'm willing to put in the work. I care about this. I love this. There's a lot that it sells. It's like, it's a multifaceted thing that you're getting across.
I always, with my leaders, I always remind them about the Maya Angelou quote, right? That, people forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Nice. And for that, candidate experience is important. So how you're making these candidates feel is extremely critical in, being able to attract key talent, top talent.
Really good point.
Really good point.
The last thing I wanted to bring up, there's this idea that hiring younger reps or fresh blood will somehow revive the culture or change the team energy. But what's the real story there? Have you seen this actually work, or is this just another shortcut that misses the root problem?
Shortcut that misses the root problem 1,000%. It's wonderful if they had the development and the training to be able to truly hit the ground running. But as we learn with everything, even when I started out in recruiting, there was still so much I needed to learn. I couldn't be thrown into something and be expected to deliver the same results I can today. It's that muscle memory. It's that practice. It's the building like your bench strength so that you can then be able to execute flawlessly, right? So it's building mastery. And oftentimes, unless you have leaders that can take the time out to be able to fully develop them, which isn't the case, we are like flying a plane as we build it. So you're expecting, somebody fresh out of college who's never understood the corporate world at all or never ever been into it to now deliver results against somebody else who has some more like reps behind them, right? It's not apples to apples, and you're not going to get the same result.
Yeah. I would say also it's a big coaching piece, right? They see, oh, they're younger, they're coachable. Whereas if you're older, they've been in the game for longer, they're not coachable anymore. They're stuck in their ways. But it's definitely not the case. I mean, that's the one thing that we look for when we're interviewing or talking to people is, are they coachable or are they stuck in their ways? Because that's a big piece of it. If they're willing to learn and grow, and that's how they're going to be successful, is just that coachability.
And I think that on the opposite side of things, when I'm building a recruiting team, I'm not picking the people with the most experience, because you know what? A lot of that experience is flaws and bias and other things that they've learned over the years that's made them, their heart a little more hardened. But it all depends on the role. You also have to have a structure if you're going to hire people that have a limited amount of experience, and you need to have patience, like Emily said, to have them grow. But I also believe that if you find the right people, just get out of their way. Like we talked about this a little bit, Max, but Emily's one of those people that I hired that I wasn't worried about whether she was working or not. I knew she was going to work her butt off because I could just sense it in my conversations with her when I interviewed her. And I think if you hire the right people, you're going to have patience for them to learn and grow, but give them a year and then look out, because they're delivering double or 2xing what another person was doing in that role, depending on the systems, the setup, all those different things. But I still believe certain systems, and you're a big sports guy. And of course, I'm from New England, so I'm going to talk about the Patriots, but the Belichick system, and he's going to be down in North Carolina now, I think now, coaching college.
Yeah, UNC.
Just show up and learn. Like he's going to be running that thing like it's a Marine boot camp, right?
Yeah.
People matter.
I think that's a testament to, I hate to say this, to Bill Belichick and to, Chris, like to you as a leader. Culture is not ping pong tables. Culture is how people treat each other. What are the expectations and how are those expectations really carried out? It's a testament there, because I think culture, it doesn't come from the bottom up. It's top down.
Yeah.
Exactly as you're saying, you're bringing on people who forget experience, who are the people that are going to learn, that are going to work, because me, the leader, I'm going to teach them what needs to be done. I'm going to show them the ropes. And I think the people are saying, well, we're going to bring in young folks to reinvigorate this company. It's because they're saying, I'm not willing to do that. I'm not going to do that. And, what a crazy notion that is. The same person who is afraid to ask you for a $10,000 raise, you're expecting that same person to go up to their superiors and say, we need to do things differently around here. Like, that's never going to or you just hired me. Thank you so much. I don't know enough about the job and I need you to sit down, take extra time to work with me. That's not going to happen. They're going to try to do the best they can to save face, and they're going to be losing sleep at night. So I think if you're hiring for someone else, you're punting it down the line. You're hiring someone to do, for example, a sales job and saying, well, it's also your job to turn around the way that people work here. And I'm one of the people that's the problem. Like, I'm hiring you to make me better at this and more giving about this and more flexible and energetic. Like, that's not my job. Like, you're hiring me to sell, and I'm relying on you to help me do that. So I think it's really backwards. It's a really, really backwards notion. I agree with what you folks are saying. I think it's total myth. It's lazy. If you get the feeling that that's what you're going into as a salesperson, I think you better be careful.
And I think the other thing too, a good analogy to this would be like raising kids, right? I think all of us, except for Emily, not calling her out at all.
Whatever. I'm going to Japan in a few weeks.
I
There's
know
a
you are.
reason for that because I don't have kids yet.
For sure, definitely sure. But if you think about, you always have people that say, "Oh, I want what you have," right? Oh, your kid's amazing. Wow, it must be great to just have a kid that was born and they're amazing, right? It doesn't work like that. Like, it's just constant time, effort, and it's the long haul. And I think it's the same thing when you're hiring people. There's that balance, right? But I still believe in discipline equals freedom, right? If you're disciplined yourself, you have more freedom on the other hand. And I think if we bring that back to sales leaders, they want the revenue, but they necessarily sometimes don't want to do all the things they need to build the teams up that they need to.
Well said. I want to piggyback off of the child analogy. Again, what you were saying there, Chris. First of all, that was a phenomenal point that you made. I put a marker there for the guy to maybe highlight this. I thought that was an excellent point. But two, it's not like, oh, it's great to have a kid who does everything, or it's not him, it took a lot of work. It's also almost like the analogy of people who will have a kid to save their marriage. And it's like, you're having a kid, that's not the child's job. That's your job to fix the marriage and then bring the child into a better environment. And it's just backwards approach. And I don't think that's worked for any couple in the world.
And there's probably organizations that have brought in sales folks to try to save the company. Same exact thing, but didn't realize that, hey, you're moving to back up and focus on a different market or other things. But
our process is off.
Yeah.
The market, exactly. And then you're bringing more people in to fix what's really a problem that you're establishing, that you're creating.
In most startups, if you've ever done work with anyone that's founded or led a company, it's got to be at least 50% of startups are not as successful as they could be because of the person that started it, and they just can't get out of their way. They want to be involved in the product. They want to be involved in sales. They want to control everything. And if you go and work for one of those companies, because I did a ton of recruiting for them, that's the first thing they say is, I'm running this account. It's at 50 million. I could take this thing to 300 million, but every time there's an issue, my boss, the owner, the founder steps in and has the conversation, and it kills my credibility, but it also, we're not growing because of that. And I think that's the same thing that happens with sales organizations. It's kind of like The Office with Michael Scott, sending him out and thinking he's going to fix things when, he's never managed a team above 10 or 15 people, right?
Yeah.
I scream it from the
I was
roof.
going to throw that in because I have Dwight right here. That's why I did that.
There we go.
I have a pickle. That's all that I have. An emotional support pickle.
Be different, be you. Oh, I like that. All right, we're sharing.
Nice. All right, so we'll just go around the horn. Quick question. If you had to bust one hiring myth, hiring salespeople of all time, what would it be?
I think we already covered the biggest one. I would say is that successful reps are coming from the bigger companies. I think that's one of the biggest myths. And I mean, even what Chris said, I feel like I'm kind of living proof of that. I had, come from a small company, little experience, and I think that's the biggest thing in sales is that that's not true. It really is not the case whatsoever. And regarding to their success, there's so many different factors, leadership being one of the biggest one, and the processes that we're giving to these reps coming in. That's going to utilize, how we utilize that is going to be how they're successful or see their success.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest myths that I'm constantly dealing with is that they need to be paid X amount. They made this much at this company. We need to match that. And that's not true. You don't need to match. When you're in sales, money comes. You earn it. But you need to earn your stripes as well and be respectful of, we're not trying to lowball you. So one of my biggest myths that I'm constantly having to have with my hiring teams is they think top talent is going to be super expensive because they think that the way to close someone is with money. And they don't realize that there are all these other contributing factors that make a difference of whether a person accepts your position or not. And it's not always the top dollar.
Sounds like they know nothing about sales, if that's what they think.
Yeah, they
Funny, right?
absolutely don't. I'm just like, oh my gosh, treat this like it's your checkbook. When you're signing off that offer letter, treat it like it's your checkbook. Would you pay that much money for that? Or would you negotiate it down? I respect people who do negotiate whenever it comes to offers because that tells me you're a true salesperson. But, it's very rare when somebody can close me And that, I think, is the biggest thing that I have to like debunk with these people, is that you don't have to pay top dollar for top talent.
I think for me, stop hiring people that are just like you. There's bias in every interview process, but if the leader doesn't know their own bias, for me, I'm outgoing and I like to have fun. Probably the best hire for me was somebody, obviously Emily too, of course, we'll mention that, but we hired somebody to do job descriptions and really elevate the back end side of us making job description into job postings. She's completely different than I am. But for me, that was the best hire. And so obviously this defining your skills, if you don't know what your sales skills are, like what are the actual skills? And I always ask this to hiring leaders, okay, the last person didn't work out. What were the 2 things that they didn't do, the reasons why they lost their job? That's all I need to know. Because then those are the 2 things that we need to hire somebody to do. And so focus on, obviously they need to be able to do the work, so they have to have that grit. But just because they look different or they interview a little differently, to me, you're missing out on people that are going to do double what you thought because you're stuck back hiring people that are just like you.
Well said.
Good stuff. Folks, and with that, I think we're going to wrap.
I have 30 minutes left on my laptop. I was telling Emily, I'm like, I have this much time left. I feel badly. I'm so sorry.
Oh, don't you dare.
Well, let's keep going then for another 35 minutes.
Audience wants a movie.
Let's give it to them. No, I'm just kidding.
They want a musical.
Oh.
I'm out. They want you to sing. Whip out the guitar.
Max actually is a musician too. I don't know if you know this. You didn't know that.
I did not.
I am. I play the piano. I play the guitar. I play the saxophone.
Oh,
I play one
whoa.
song on the saxophone, but I'm a big
If you
Springsteen
can do one,
fan.
you
So.
can
I was just going to say.
So,
Yeah.
I was hoping
I thought
it
of
was
Bruce.
Careless Whisper. I was thinking Sexy Sax Man. That's you.
you know what?
my
I'm from New Jersey, so
Yeah.
when
That's why I thought Bruce.
Yeah.
I came across a saxophone, and it's like I have to learn Thunder Road.
Yeah.
And then once I learned Thunder Road, I'm like, great. Now I know everything that I've ever wanted to know on the saxophone.
And I'm done.
Yeah. My life is complete.
Yeah.
This has been really fun. Thank you, Max, for allowing us to
Absolutely.
be on. Chris, thank you for thinking of us and letting us be a part of this as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, you can always catch us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more episodes of Closing Conversations.